And coming up on this week's show, Tornado, the world's first digitally signalled steam locomotive, is on test on the main line. Rail Minister Lord Hendy admits to using his mobile phone whilst driving his own vintage bus. And Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander delivers her first big set-piece speech. So welcome to Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and...
from me, Richard Bowker.
Well, we start with a story this week about the convergence of the old and the new, the dramatic combination of analogue and digital. For some time now, Network Rail has been developing a brand new approach to signalling on Britain's railways. Known today as digital signalling, the introduction of ETCS, European Train Control System Level 2, will remove the need for all line-side signalling by transferring the driver's authority to move from a fixed signal and into the cab. Fine and dandy for modern traction with their miles of cabling and electronic management systems, but how on earth do you install ETCS on a heritage locomotive? And harder still, how on earth do you do it in the very hostile environment of a steam locomotive? Well, that's exactly what's been done with A1 Steam Locomotive Trust number 60163 Tornado, which over the last week or so has been out testing on the Cambrian main line in Wales. Now, they're still testing this week, in fact, and we're planning to bring everyone a full report once that testing is complete. But Richard, our curiosity has been piqued, so you've been doing some digging to find out. So how have things gone this far as you've been able to discover?
Yeah, well, on Tornado itself, our understanding from good sources is that it's worked. It's proven to work. I think the engines run from Shrewsbury to Welshpool and then Shrewsbury to Newtown a couple of times. So it's accumulated a fair chunk of miles. I suspect, I wouldn't be surprised if the only things that have done more miles, locomotives have done more miles under ETCS now are the Class 37s, the Class 97s, I think they're called.
The yellow ones, yeah.
The yellow ones that Network Rail have got. So this is all great knowledge, great learning, and if it had not worked, we'd have known. But I understand it's gone pretty well.
No
so
news
that's
is
good
good
news.
news there, yeah.
Yeah, and that's great. Because I think what's interesting about Tornado, I mean, as you said there in the kind of the introduction to that, how on earth do you do it on a steam locomotive? And it's a different set of it's as mechanical and analog as you kind of get, really, doesn't it? But I suppose on the locomotive, it's the same thing happens as it would on anything else, which is it applies the brake. So that's kind of that. But the environment must be unbelievably hostile. You've got coal dust, you've got heat, you've got steam, you've got moisture, you've got all of that kind of stuff. And I suspect, I mean, you drive steam engines. I imagine in a modern train cab, you can control the lighting, and so you can see screens easily and so on. It must be quite a challenge with the fireman opens the firebox. The next thing you know, you've got all of those glares and reflections. So I think they'll, I suppose that where I would say is if you can make it work on Tornado, you can probably make it work anywhere. And that's got to be a good thing to have learned.
Absolutely. And you've got steam blowing about, which refracts the light. I haven't seen the cab since they did it, but where have they put the screens and the equipment and the stuff? Because I have cab Tornado, and it's steam engines aren't easy, because I know they had these problems when they put TPWS on there. And you're right about the environment, because don't forget, you've got coal and water being mixed that produces a weak solution of sulfuric acid.
Yeah.
Very hostile environment. So all credit to the engineers and the designers if they've managed to fit it and keep it dry and sweet and working. And I'm looking forward to hearing more. And it's a real trailblazer, isn't it? It's a locomotive doing lots of miles with level 2 on it, and see how it goes on the East Coast Main Line, for which it was built, or the design was intended in the first place.
The design was intended, yeah. I mean, the screen is immediately sort of in front of the driver's sort of eye line, really, just sort of where the regulator is, I think, on Tornado. So it's directly in front of you. So that's obviously, that's quite a good place. I take all your other points, though, about, glares and refractions and reflections. I've always wondered with Tornado, and I felt this when we went to LSL and saw Deltic, the Deltic, which is Royal Scots Grey, that was being fitted with it there. That's the Pathfinder diesel heritage loco. Whereas obviously Tornado is the Pathfinder steam locomotive. You kind of ask yourself the question, why? Right? But I suppose the answer to that is they'll accumulate so much knowledge with Tornado and maybe with the Deltic, if that gets up and running, that will be applicable to the rest of the network. I think the one thing that's interesting, and we should just say on this show, there is a view, I mean, I've heard it from ministers recently, ETCS level 2, it's marvellous. It's going to have so much more capacity on the railway. Not buying that, guys. Yes, it will lead to the decommissioning of line-side signalling. That's a cost saving. It's a risk mitigation thing. You can't have cable theft if it ain't there to nick. But this capacity point, we just need to kind of manage expectations on that. It might increase the odd one or, maybe one or two viable paths at capacity, but whether it's going to lead to a big increase in capacity, I don't buy it.
And those few extra paths are very much worth having. But if the mainstream media hook onto this, we're going to be able to cram loads more trains on the track, and then when it comes along, we can't. It's going to be the roof's going to fall on our heads. So we do need to be careful we don't set too many hairs running. But well done on them doing it. I'm looking forward to hearing some more. And I have to say, on a purely human level, I bet they've had some fun doing it.
Oh yeah, and absolutely. And there's a little bit of video that some people have put on YouTube of it at Welshpool, I think, in Newtown. It's all at night. It's very atmospheric. It looks rather marvellous, actually. So, yes, if you're into all of that, then terrific. But well done, them.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Here's a story that's had people talking this week, and that's the news that Rail Minister Lord Hendy has admitted using his cell phone whilst driving his own vintage double-decker Routemaster bus through London at rush hour for a railway family charity event on March 28th. Ouch. We asked the DFT for a comment, and it said, last month, Peter Hendy used his phone while driving. He has apologised in full for this error of judgment and has contacted the police. What say you, RB?
Well, it's not great timing, is it? I mean, look, it's clearly the wrong thing to do. It's the wrong thing for anybody to do. And I suppose he's done, in one sense, done the right thing by just going, you know what?
Fessing up.
Shouldn't have done it, and apologising completely and putting his sort of name forward. What happens next? And there'll be people going, oh, well, he's got to resign. I think the danger of that, and this is not a comment about Peter Hendy, by the way. It's a comment about people in general. There is, in this world of social media, immediate keyboard warriors, everybody wants everybody to resign immediately, and sometimes that's probably the right approach, but, I kind of try and put that noise to one side. For the government, it's not great timing. He is pushing through quite a lot of important legislation, and that's not a reason, by the way, to not do what somebody believes to be the right thing. But it'll be fascinating to see
how it plays
this goes, how it plays out. No question, shouldn't have done it.
No,
but it's. I don't think it's quite as straightforward as perhaps some people would like it to be. I think it may run for a bit, personally.
Apparently, it was one of his own passengers who dobbed him in.
But it was the wrong thing to be doing, wasn't it?
It was.
So you can't navigate around that, really. I mean,
I wasn't seeking to.
I know.
I was
absolutely
just adding to the facts of the situation.
Yeah. No, indeed. But there we go. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
All right, on we go. Last week, Richard went to York. Jolly or work, well, they're one and the same according to Richard, to meet a few senior railway people and record some excellent interviews. Here's the first of two we're going to preview this week. This one is with Ian Yeowart, Managing Director of Grand Union Trains, who has been described as the godfather of open access. As a result, he inevitably divides opinion, and I think loves it. He's a strident and feisty reporter of all things open access, and as a good Yorkshireman, he's never shy about telling you what he thinks, as Richard discovered. Here's an extract from his interview where Ian was being typically uncompromising, or should I say, blunt.
So on January the 6th, the Secretary of State, Heidi Alexander, wrote to the chair of the ORR in a letter that I probably described as a shot across the bows, right? So it said, I realise the law's not changed, brackets, yet, but I just want you to bear in mind the impact that open access applications have on the DFT's budget, perhaps more than you have, maybe. Well, certainly that's what the letter said. I think you wrote to the DFT and said, why are you changing? Why the U-turn in policy? Is that what was your reaction to that?
No,
letter?
there were two different things there,
Okay.
Richard. When I wrote to the DFT, it was because they supported our application to go from Cardiff to Edinburgh,
Right.
because we were going to introduce bigger trains, more seats, and that route is undersubscribed with seats. So that's a bit like a system, isn't it? If you put more trains on there, even if you take people from the current operator, they'll just fill up behind because there just is not enough capacity. I think everybody knows that. I was a bit surprised in the letter from Heidi Alexander to suddenly find very quickly, soon afterwards, she's at Newton Aycliffe with the Prime Minister taking credit for the new trains that the Open Access Operator First Group is going to order. I think she's...
Politics, eh?
Well, it is politics, and the letter is similar to many letters that went before it from other secretaries of states, not all from Labour, but as we've sort of pointed out, we have a huge amount of support from a lot of very senior Labour politicians who are now no longer, they're in the House rather than in the Lords rather than in the House. All the early open access operations, Grand Central, Hull Train, all approved by a Labour government.
Yeah.
And most of the places that have benefited from open access are what you might have called red wall seats, nearly all of them, generally. So you can understand the benefits, but the reason a lot of them are red wall seats is because economically they're depressed in relation to elsewhere. Look at the coalfields in South Yorkshire, for example. They've been dissipated over time. So it's, for us, I suppose, if you like, you could look upon us as sharing out the benefits, and certainly the benefits of privatisation, because without them, there wouldn't be any benefit, would there, to the Durham coast, to Hull, to West York? There wouldn't be any, because it wouldn't have happened. So I can see all the benefits that come within that. And in relation to what the Secretary of State has said, I know that First Group in particular, no doubt Arriva as well, are lobbying about the fact, look, I understand. I mean, I thought a letter was very early in the process, very quick, rather than maybe consider a little bit more what was happening. But it's her prerogative, she's the Secretary of State, but she also said, it needs to maybe bring something different.
Yeah.
So we're going to open a new railway station and a freight line in Hampshire. So that's different. Whether we can get approval, I don't know. We passed the MPA test. The modelled abstraction, not the real number, just the model number, is well within the realm of what's previously been accepted. But as I say, if I take us all the way back to when we first did the work here, you'd be amazed how many people just still regard railway as far too expensive, irrespective of where they are. And the growth here has been significant, as well as the growth elsewhere. I mean, it's off the scale further north. And that, I think, is something that we need to buy into. There are no quiet trains here, unless you go at 10 o'clock at night. And even then, depends which way you're going, whether it's busy or quiet. But at the end of the day, I love the railway, but I'm not a train spotter. I love the railway for what it can do.
I always like hearing Ian. He's very good on those things. He always lets you make your case and ask the question, and you don't get a big insight into what he's thinking as you're asking it, and then he just goes for it, doesn't he, and tells you exactly why he believes you to be totally wrong.
Totally wrong, yeah. And he doesn't answer the question either, right? So, I mean, there were a couple of occasions.
You got to love him.
You got to love it. He answers the question that he wished you'd asked, not the one you actually asked, so he'd be a brilliant politician, actually. He blamed me.
He did.
During the... Yeah. He said,
And not only once, several times.
Yeah.
He almost had his finger out. He almost had his finger out in your days at the SRA.
Yeah. The only reason I had to go to Sunderland was because you messed it all up at the SRA. Oh, right. Okay. Glad it's my fault then. Look, he was great. I don't agree with a good chunk of what he said. And there's a bit in the interview when we published the whole thing where he talks about the differences between the East Coast and the West Coast and says the only difference must be open access because the East Coast has done really well. And I challenge him on that and say, no, sorry, it's the East Coast, it's more or less a leisure market, and then on the West Coast, you've got Manchester. And no business. So that's high-yielding business.
Well, even very little commuting, because...
certainly in the north end of it, indeed. Probably quite a bit. There used to be quite a bit sort of south of Milton Keynes, as there is in Peterborough, but none. But then he basically said, oh, yeah, no, you've got a point there. But anyway.
Yes, never mind that.
Never mind that. So, look, he's great. And I think people will love it. If you've already made up your mind on open access and think it's fantastic, you will be stood there cheering.
Punching the air.
If you're not convinced, I suspect he won't change your mind, but it's still great to listen to.
The other thing you have to say is his command of the subject in detail. He says at one point he's got a PhD in open access. He is never hesitant or short of an answer at all with the information he needs to back up his argument.
I wasn't sure whether that's because he's from Yorkshire or because he's got a really good command of the argument. I think it's the latter. I think that's true. You
know what they say, Richard, which is a Lancastrian I know you'll go along with. You can always tell a Yorkshireman, you just can't tell him much.
Indeed not. But honestly, I hope everybody does listen to it. It's terrific stuff.
So the full interview with Ian is definitely worth a watch or a listen. If you watch or listen on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and switch on notifications by clicking that little bell. That way you'll be notified when we publish the full interview in the next week or so. And if you listen via audio on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or any other platform of your choice, then please do the same thing so you get the notification. Don't miss it. Ian and Richard had a great chat and, of course, parted friends, but there was plenty of feisty stuff between hello, Ian, and thank you for coming on Green Signals, especially when they discussed revenue abstraction. I enjoyed that, and the differences between East and West Coast, as Richard just said. Now, someone else who was in York at the same time as Richard was the Secretary of State, Heidi Alexander. She attended an event at the National Railway Museum and gave her first really big set-piece speech to an assembled crowd of rail industry participants and stakeholders. Media were not invited to this one, but the DFT have helpfully published a transcript of her speech on their website. So, Richard, what was your take on what she said? Did we learn anything new?
Not in policy terms. Okay. This wasn't a speech about what I'm going to do. It was more a speech of why I'm doing it or why I care.
But
so it was
it's of interest.
Very much so. It's very much so of interest. And it was personal, and it is quite personal, actually. She talks about her time growing up in Swindon, then going to be a local councillor, I think, in Lewisham, then becoming the MP for East Lewisham, becoming Deputy Mayor for Transport in London, and then obviously going back to Swindon as an MP and now becoming Secretary of State for Transport. And, so you got this sort of broad sweep of what she'd learned on the way and why she cared. And she was very careful not just to talk about rail. She obviously talked about other things, all her brief, really, and there's no war on the motorist. I like to drive as well. So that was in there too. So like I say, I think the message was, I care. I really care. You can have confidence in me. I really wanted this job. I'm battling hard to make it better. And one of the things she did say, she said, the history of our transport network, the stories of the men and women who designed it, built it and operated it and used it are woven into the fabric of our communities in the 21st century Britain. And it's you, the people in this room, who are adding to that rich tapestry every day. I mean, it was quite sort of flowery language, really.
It's good stuff, but you don't often hear it from politicians.
No, and no, you don't. And she talked about why transport's important, and there was nothing she said that anybody could have gone, well, I don't quite agree with that. It was good. And then after she'd sort of set that scene, she told her own story. As I say, quite personal.
I certainly like those 4 words: "You keep life moving."
Yeah,
And
yes.
that really sums it up.
Yeah.
In fact, if you change "you" for railways, there's a bit of a phrase that you could stick on posters, isn't there? Railways keep life moving.
Indeed.
So there you are, hint. But do you think she missed an opportunity by not talking more about policy or strategy? Was it too personal?
Yeah, I wondered exactly that. I don't think so. I think there is a time and a place for what she did. She did talk about the power of devolution. Obviously, there were lots of sort of metro mayors, local leaders there, being in the north and being in York, and that's kind of fair enough. She did actually use a great quote from a guy called Enrique. I'll just make sure I get his name right. Penaloza, who's a former mayor of Bogota, who once said, "An advanced city is not one where the poor have to own a car, but one where the rich choose to use public transport."
I like that.
It's a great line. And I saw that firsthand in places like Dubai, for instance, where when the metro opened in Dubai, you would often see, high-ranking Emiratis using it. They liked it, right? So that, I think, that's a great line. So I think this was about inspiring confidence, sort of almost saying, I'm here, I'm committed, I'm going to do it. I'm told it went down pretty well from people that were there. There were conversations around the room about, well, at least we've got somebody who wants the job, which in fairness, her predecessor, Lou Hague, also wanted the job. But of course, their predecessor, Mark Harper, almost certainly didn't want the job, right? So at least
Lord Harper.
I'm very sorry. Yes, let's do the appropriate right. But at least I think people who I've sort of connected with said, you got the impression she really wants this job and she's going to make a jolly good go of it. And that can't be a bad thing. Tougher tests coming. Spending review is going to be a big test. But let's see. I think she probably did win some friends.
And her remarks about transport and the government's view of it are very different to Mrs. Thatcher's famous comment about if you're still using buses in your 30s, you're a failure.
Yeah.
Very.
Well, people who believe, I think that's one of the sillier comments of a politician about transport. But anyway,
and offensive to boot. Okay, now to our second interview preview. Richard's been busy. And this one is bound to be very widely listened to. I hope it is. It's with Matt Rice, the Chief Operating Officer of Northern Trains, and it's a belter. His passion and drive really come across in this interview, which we'll publish in the next few days. But in the meantime, here's a short clip where Richard asked him about progress towards sorting out the fact that Sundays are not yet included in all contracts for conductors as yet.
We are in a stable place with our train crew, so we have a good number of train drivers on our books, just over 2,000. That's more than we officially need in our establishment to run the railway. And I think positively we're in a stable place with ASLEF as well, and that's credit to them, and hopefully they'll say to us for being progressive and looking forward. We have a 3-year rest day working deal. That doesn't come, it's not cheap, frankly. But it's a foundational sort of calming moment so that we can get into the nitty-gritty of what train crew change and evolution needs to be. Credit to the train, again, since we've had that rest day working in place into the summer, things have settled on the train crew. It's not as straightforward in the conductor grades. And again, this is very much about history and legacy rather than individuals or unions. We have T's and C's that don't oblige our colleagues to work 7 days. And we've had some false starts that predate me, and lots of people have put lots of time into some legacy issues. And I think officially we've had a formal dispute with the RMT for almost a decade, which is in many ways ludicrous. But that's no one person's fault. It just isn't. So what Tricia, hopefully with my support, she'll say, and my team have done, and I think at this point, with support, first of all, from the RMT, with Rail North, who we work for as a DFT in the North, with the elected members of the North, with the DFT and more latterly with HMT, is really lent in after the very difficult run into Christmas when we were just cancelling on too many trains on the day, to the challenge of fixing Sundays once and for all. And fixing Sundays means getting a set of terms and conditions across our conductor grades where Sundays is in the working week in a way that respects and values where we've come from, recognising that at a global level I can talk about 1,500 conductors or so, but there's a story and an individual like me who's going home at the weekend now that is behind that. And we've really, I guess, where we've worked as a leadership group in Northern over the last few months is perhaps less about exactly what the T&C should say, more about going and talking to conductors and saying, well, if you were to do Sundays, what does it mean? And Richard, candidly, I've got people that work in Sundays and are going to be better off because of this, hopefully, with no change. And I've got people that are probably going to have to reconsider their career in rail, and that's a shame because these people are committed. They're doing a good job. Certainly, for all the Sundays challenge, some of our Manchester service groups are really high performing, and that's because conductors are good at dispatch and they look after customers. So we don't want to lose people, but we are going to have to get to a position where we can run that 7-day railway. And I think, therefore, that if we sit here now talking about a really strong coalition of the willing, what I hope will be true over the next 6 months is that we will get the financial envelope in place. We will make good on the conversation we've had with the trade union and the colleague base. We'll get a decision through ballot that people want to move to this. And then we can earn our money in the executive team and do what will be a huge change programme of bringing new conductors in and moving our rosters around and our diagrams around such that 7-day railway comes in play.
It was a great interview, Richard, and he certainly he made sure the context of the past about the fact that, you know, Northern is actually two companies with two completely set to cultures and contracts either side of the Pennines, and welding that together is difficult.
Yeah. Of course, he went slightly further as well. He said, in fact, it's not really just two; it's kind of loads more than that. You know, it's kind of a real, I suppose, smorgasbord of stuff.
Oh, that's a good word.
It's a good word, that, isn't it? One of the things I must admit, I don't know Matt. Well, no, I do now, but I didn't know him.
Me neither.
Background in Network Rail, been at Network Rail for sort of a 20 years, really, but not a train operator by background. And so, given the noise that there's been around Northern, I went to the interview thinking this is going to be quite interesting. And I actually thought as well, fair play to him and to Northern for being prepared to do it, because, you know, they've had a few people throwing a few bricks in their direction. And I came away, and I'm not a naive person, you know, if anything, I can be probably slightly more cynical than some. I came away very impressed.
Yeah.
Because there was a passion. In fact, I described it to somebody, it was really authentic. You know, it was genuinely authentic. It didn't sort of descend into, you know, sort of his own naivety, really. It was just really authentic, passionate. A few buzzwords, okay, that's fine. It's 2025. But nonetheless, I came away going, well, I'll tell you what, I'm a lot more confident they're going to sort this out now than I was before I started this conversation, which is a, you know, I always think that's a decent sign.
I do love to see people who burn with that kind of passion, wherever they come from on the political spectrum or wherever in the railway, that they do it. And he was completely on it, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I just thought you caught him once, I think, and that was about my big bugbear, of course, about stood shivering at Leeds while the train doors are kept locked and the staff amble along at the last minute. He seemed a bit more unaware of that, but he did say he'd come back on it. And actually, Alex Hornby, who of course now works at Northern as well, picked up one of my comments on Twitter and said he's more than happy to talk about that. So I think I'll be going to see Alex fairly soon, and we'll see what they say, because it is infuriating. And what you get people using the Transec argument and its security, and that is nonsense, because other companies manage to do it. It's a management choice.
Say what you think, Nigel.
It's a management choice.
I mean, but even with that, yes, it was the question where there hadn't been a brief on it, right? but
he handled it
so many people would have obfuscated, answered something different, waffled, taught absolute, and he didn't do any of that.
He handled it well.
He handled it very, very well.
By being honest.
By being honest. Yeah. Isn't it amazing how actually being honest and being straight answers most things?
Doesn't it just? We'll let that one sink in.
Mm.
And now it's time to thank everyone who supports us. And I know we use more of the same words each week, but we really do mean this. First of all, our thanks to RIA, the Railway Industry Association, our programme supporter, and to Rail Business Daily, our media supporter. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your support, as ever, is hugely appreciated by all three of us. And a big thank you to everyone who's left us a super thanks on YouTube this week. And you wonderful people are Andrew Seddon, Stephen Hutton, Alan Kirkman, Bob Walsh, Pete Driver, taking care here, Norfolk and Good, Chris Exley, Graham Whitley, Nigel Mapston, David Shirez, Alistair Rutledge, John Kirkman, and Graham Webster. And they're not just words. We really do appreciate so many of you leaving us those super thanks. They help enormously. So thanks very much indeed from Richard, Stef, and myself.
Absolutely. And thanks also to our new gold and silver members, to Paul Wright, Alan Husband, and to Dominic Ryan, who upgraded from silver to gold. Thank you, all of you, and everybody else is a member. Really appreciate it. You can see all our supporters and members listed in the end credits. My usual plea, if you're a gold and silver member, don't forget, if you've not sent us your postal address, please do so we can send you cool things. I'm reasonably up to date with members mugs. I think I'm about 3 or 4 I've got to send out in the next week or so. But there's still probably about 10 or so of gold and silver members who are entitled to a mug, and we simply don't have a means of getting the mug to them. So don't forget to let us have your address. But thank you for your support.
I did enjoy that picture you sent to me and Steph from Paul at the Brig Line Action Group with his embroidered beanie hat with his green signals badge proudly centered below the Action Group logo.
It was a lovely photograph, wasn't it? Yeah, no, it was great. And thank you for other members who've sent us photographs of your merch and various bits and bobs around the network. They're brilliant. They honestly, we really love those. So
we do. It gives us a nice little buzz. It's a great little community we're building here with us and the readers, listeners and viewers, isn't it? I absolutely love it. And now it's time for this week's Railway News Roundup. We start with a story loads of you wrote to us about. So thanks to Steve Roberts, David Redgewell, John Kirkman, and Harry Kernahan, to name but a few. The Northumberland Line, is proving to be so popular, Richard Bowker take note, that longer trains are being considered to avoid people having to stand. County Council Deputy Leader Richard Wearmouth has described it as a good problem, high quality. That passenger numbers are on, of course, to be 5 times the original estimate. Must even make you smile, Richard. It's looking like 250,000 journeys will have been made by Easter when they had predicted just 50,000. Let that sink in. An excellent example of build it and they will come. So there you go, Richard. The models get it wrong again. Go on, pour cold water on that if you dare.
Build it and they will come. Yeah, it still costs 300 million quid, right? Look,
but you're going to pay it off a lot quicker with 5 times the projected passengers, aren't you?
Well, wait till you listen to the Matt Rice interview and he points out how much it costs to actually move everybody on Northern.
You just can't help yourself, can you?
The point's this. I think the Northumberland line is great. I said so when we were talking about reopenings, right? It is good. It's a part of the country where reopening a line made sense given the local transport provision in the area. But that, right? But drop this build it and they will come stuff, right? You've got to look at... No, it's not true.
They do.
But it
Borders
doesn't mean...
or anything else, build it and they turn up in droves.
Doesn't mean that the cost benefit stacks up every time. You've still got to look at them on a case-by-case basis. Now, this is great, right? This is fantastic. Mind you, I don't think it may yet have occurred to the local authority. There aren't like Class 158 sets sat around doing absolutely nothing. So the business of extending the trains is actually not a trivial matter, as you know. I mean, the fleet size is the fleet size, right? But nonetheless, it is good news. But anybody listening to this going, that means that every railway line project, reopening project should be taken through. No.
What was it Mrs. Thatcher again, for the second time today, quoted? famously said after the Falklands, rejoice, rejoice, Richard, 5 times.
I am rejoicing. I'm just saying that it doesn't mean every other madcap scheme. This is not a madcap scheme. This was great. Needs it. Yeah, all right. Anyway, moving on. Oh, well, it's right. I'm going to have a go next. Because here's a really curious story. Now, you know, like you kind of read stuff and you go,
yes.
Hang on a minute, right? So this was the Daily Telegraph. They ran a story last week with a headline, Labour blunder will cost taxpayers 250 million extra to nationalise rail firm. And they were talking about South Western Railway, which is one of the biggest train operating companies. And, you know, with any story like this, I never really ask myself anymore who or what or when. I always ask why. Why this? Why now? Now, the story, if people aren't aware, contains a couple of oddities, right? The basic thread of the story is that civil servants have messed up. They haven't started negotiating with the rolling stock leasing companies quickly enough. They're now going to end up having to pay 50 million a year more in leasing costs than they would have done if they'd kind of got their act together. And isn't that a disaster and all the rest of it, right? So that was the story. Now, the reason why it's odd, if it's true that negotiations should have started 18 months or so ago, well, hang on a minute. South Western Railway, that was when we had a Conservative government, right? Which is part of the point of the story. I have no question in my mind that the team at South Western Railway would have been cracking on with that. And the DfT, who were on the other side of the National Rail contract with SWR, would have been doing the same thing. So this whole notion that nothing could start until Christmas, it just doesn't quite ring true.
Sense,
okay. And rolling stock leasing is not actually as complicated as people think. You know, think about if you go and get one of those PCPs to buy your car. You pay, you've got a capital cost. You agree how long you're going to pay it back over. You might put a deposit down, and then you've got a balloon payment at the end, haven't you? And then you sort of pay it off in the intermediate period. And actually, rolling stock leasing's not really much different to that. The really interesting thing in this piece is it claims that civil servants have insisted these leases are only 5 years long. Now, we've not been able to confirm that because nobody will talk about this at all. But that of itself will drive the price up.
Of course it does.
Which is mad when, you know, most of these trains have got, okay, 159s on the Salisbury Exeter line, fair enough. But all the modern stuff, no. So if that's true, there's your reason your price has gone up. I looked at this story, Nigel, and thought, who's in the firing line here, really?
Roscoe's.
And I wonder if it's the Roscoe's. And actually, this is all about, you know, just laying the ground, all the rest of it. Because when you read it, the Roscoe's, they don't really say anything. They refuse to comment. So it's a bit open season against them. And there's a comment, there was a really interesting comment which I found in the article, where it says, let's just find it here. It says, in March, the Office of Rail and Road said it was reopening a 2020 investigation into choice and competition in the rolling stock market over fears that Roscoe's were charging too much and failing to compete properly against each other. And then it says, you know, Rot Rail wouldn't talk to us, Angel Trains wouldn't talk to us, Porterbrook wouldn't talk to us. Right. That Office of Road and Rail investigation is not reopening anything. It's actually the ORR doing a review to check that the last competition and market study into Roscoe's, the things that the Roscoe's agreed to do are still being done. That's a very different thing to a new review. So I read this and went, the Roscoe's need to probably just be on their toes here, really. Very curious story. So we don't normally take a long time over news round pieces, but I thought that was worth just a bit of a discussion.
Well, we'll have to see what else comes back, won't we?
We certainly will.
Okay, this is another curious one, Richard. Progress on a new station, White Rose, that's being built between Cottingley and Morley near Leeds was halted in March last year after the project cost, Rose, this is right up your street, isn't it, above the original £26 million budget for a station. Apparently, a difference of opinion between the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, which invested £22 million, and landowner Munro K, which invested the other £4 million, is behind the work being paused. We asked the Combined Authority, what is this difference of opinion and what's been done to resolve the issue?
And it was very curious, right? So they said this. You ready for this?
Go
So this was a joint statement from Munro Quay and the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Following the temporary pause in construction at White Rose Station, we've been working with partners to resolve issues so that work can restart on site. The station is a major priority for West Yorkshire and an update is anticipated in the coming months. I mean, that's like trying to knit fog, isn't it, to work out what I mean, it just says nothing really.
I'm getting fed up with that saying nothing statements.
That is just word soup. But this is worth looking at. I mean, it'd be fascinating to find out what is going on here. It's a big station. This is one where you kind of get why it's costing quite a bit of money. But this doesn't feel like it's been managed particularly well. But we shall see. We shall keep an eye on this one.
Maybe we ought to highlight the worst examples of word soup because they are damned annoying. Very famous line in my favourite Jerry Rafferty song is, "We talked all night and left it all unsaid."
Yes, well, there you go. That's a great example of this. Now, it's not this story is not a candidate for Word Soup of the Week, but it is a candidate for perhaps Alternate Reality Award. The Cirencester Community Railway Project is celebrating, apparently, the establishment of a community interest company on April the 3rd. It will be known as the Cotswold Community Railway, CIC, a not-for-profit company that is committed to improving public transport in the Cotswolds. That's fine, right? But the purpose of this was to raise funds to complete documents for a Transport and Works Act application for a new rail link to Cirencester, which is basically reinstating the rail link between Kemble Station, which is on the line from Swindon to Cheltenham and Gloucester, to Cirencester. It was a branch line, and I suspect it was a beach enclosure. I can't impress enough on. I don't know if they're listening, but it was don't do this, right? There is no case for restoring a branch line, even if you use some light rail vehicle or whatever from Kemble to Cirencester. I had a look at the bus timetable, right? So Stagecoach 882, service 882, runs from Cirencester to Kemble, but I think it only runs about 5 or 6 times a day, whereas there must be, 20, 30 departures from Kemble a day. Instead of wasting your money on doing a study for a new railway line, go and talk to the bus operator, as they would in Switzerland, and just have a regular, high-quality bus service from Cirencester to Kemble Station. Problem solved. There you go.
They're going to love you, but it sounds like common sense to me. But of course, the thing about common sense, it's not that common, is it?
Indeed.
Last point before we finish the roundup, Richard. April 12th marked exactly 2,000 days since the last Rail Network Enhancements Pipeline was published, which gives the supply chain, or is supposed to, sight of future schemes so they can plan, invest and resource for them accordingly. Pin and back, it was October 2019, 6 years ago, when the previous government committed to publishing the RNEP annually. And that's this week's Railway News Roundup.
Sorry, I have to say, you said that with such great emphasis, right? Anyway, dripping with sarcasm. I do apologise. Keep going, Nigel.
It's all right. It was meant to. Publishing it annually. The thing is, if everybody else broke the commitments like that, the government would be on you like a ton of bricks, isn't it? But it's all right for them.
Yeah, no, indeed. Indeed.
Rant over. And that's this week's Railway News Roundup. If you'd like to send us any snippets of news, you can drop us an email at news@greensignals.org. We can't promise to read them all out, but the best ones we will. And we'll always name check whoever sends us an email, which we read out. And hooray, I remembered to put the email address in there then.
Oh, well done, because he doesn't always remember to do that.
Which I often forget.
Yeah, no comment. Right, anyway, it's time to do the quiz.
Yay!
So last week's question was this. There are plenty of examples of road and rail bridges, but I would like to know where there was one on Britain's railway which could be used by trains and vehicles, just not at the same time. And I must admit,
we need our backsides kicking.
We absolutely do. I was thinking of one in particular, historical
hand held up.
And then the first answer that came and said, the Britannia road bridge in Portmaddock, which of course the Welsh Highland railway runs over. It's effectively operated as a long level crossing, but nonetheless, it's got train tracks, but only cars or trains can use it, not both at the same time. And we both went to each other. Yeah, we were on that quite recently. So,
and which we've both been over many times, including on locomotives.
Many, many times. So, yes, that was a correct answer. Also, a correct answer was Preston Docks, where on the Ribble, there's the Ribble Railway, isn't there? And there's a bridge over the docks there. That's a good answer. Here's a really good one, and I've tried to triple check this, but one listener said Newhaven West Quay Bridge, Newhaven, when the West Quay or West Dock was open. And I can certainly find pictures of trains on the bridge, on the tracks, with no cars. So, okay, I think that sounds fair enough. But the one that a lot of people said was Connell Bridge on the Ballachulish branch line, which did have a road next to a railway line, but they were so tight you couldn't have them run at the same time. So it was when the train was going over, the cars had to wait. And that was, I suspect it was the same as the Britannia Bridge in Portmadoc. So those were correct answers. We put everybody into a hat. Many people drew one out at random, and the winner was Mike Mundy. So well done, Mike. Send us an email to quiz@greensignals.org with your address, and we will get your quiz winner's mug to you. Right, this week's quiz. There's quite a few railway stations where there is no access by road for vehicles.
Yeah.
But where could I visit a railway station that is so isolated it has no pedestrian access either?
Oh. Okay.
So if you think you know the answer to that, I think there might be more than one, but there's certainly one that I know very, very well. If you think you know, answer please to quiz@greensignals.org by midday on Saturday, April the 19th. We'll put all the correct answers into a hat. We'll draw one out at random, and the winner will get one of our very special and highly prized quiz winners' mugs.
Good stuff. That Connell Bridge is he's lovely, isn't it?
Amazing, yeah.
And still there doing the job of work. It's just
it's just a road bridge now. Absolutely, yeah.
And here's a nice story to end on, Richard. Alstom has announced an artist in residence for the greatest gathering in Derby in August. Tim O'Brien will be painting en plein air to capture the rolling stock, atmosphere and architecture on show at the Rail 200 celebration. Tim's an award-winning artist, author and tutor who has worked on a wide variety of subject matter, including military history, public occasions, rail, maritime and automotive topics. It'll be really interesting to see what he creates at the event.
I mean, I don't know about you. I can't draw for toffee, as they say. My daughter can, but I can't. So I don't know where she gets it from, because my wife's equally as clueless as me. And when you see somebody like Tim who paints the way he does, it's just breathtaking. I mean, it's just such talent. So that's a great story.
It is. It's going to be great. And sadly, that's all we've got time for this week. So thanks so much for watching or listening. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. And if you really want to support us, find out about membership on YouTube or Patreon. But most importantly of all, please join us again next week for this show, which will always be free. So we'll see you then, hopefully. Meanwhile, it's goodbye from me, and
it's goodbye from me.
Have a fantastic week.